I am Samuel, and this is my story. The horn of oil sat heavy in the folds of my robe, pressing against my hip with every step the donkey took toward Bethlehem. I could feel it there, a small clay weight that had somehow come to feel like the heaviest thing I had ever carried. Heavier than the ark I had known as a boy sleeping near it in Shiloh. Heavier than the mantle of judge I had worn over Israel for so many years. This oil was different. This oil was for a king. I had wept for Saul. I want the listener to understand that before anything else, I had wept for him, nights on end, until the Lord himself said to me, "How long will you grieve over Saul, seeing I have rejected him from being king over Israel?" There is a particular kind of grief that comes when you watch a man you anointed with your own hands, a man you loved like something between a son and a mistake you couldn't undo, slowly become someone you no longer recognized. Saul had stood head and shoulders above the people, humble in the threshing floor when I found him searching for lost donkeys. And I had watched that humility curdle into fear, and that fear into disobedience, and that disobedience into a hollowness that no crown could hide. I had told him the kingdom was torn from him. I had told him, and then I had gone home to Ramah and grieved as if I had buried my own child. So when the word of the Lord came to me, "Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." My first response was not faith. I want to be honest with you because the scriptures do not hide my fear, and neither will I. "How can I go?" I said aloud, alone in my house, as if arguing with the walls. "If Saul hears it, he will kill me." The Lord did not rebuke my fear. He gave me a plan instead, gentle as a father steadying a trembling hand. "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord,' and invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do." So I went, not because my fear had vanished, but because obedience does not wait for fear to leave the room. Obedience simply walks past it. The road to Bethlehem climbed through hills gone amber with late barley, the air thick with dust kicked up by the heifer's hooves and threaded through with the smell of crushed thyme where my sandals brushed the roadside growth. I had walked this road before, decades earlier, younger, when my name still felt new in my own mouth. Now my beard was white as fleece. My joints ached with the rhythm of the donkey's gait, and I found myself praying with each mile, not eloquent prayers, just the plain, worn prayers of an old man who has learned that eloquence matters far less to God than honesty. "Lord, let me see rightly. Let me not mistake the shell of a man for the substance you have chosen." Bethlehem was a small town, the kind where a stranger's approach ripples outward before he has even reached the gate. By the time I arrived, elders were already gathering in the open space near the well, their faces uncertain, almost afraid. One stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly around the folds of his robe. "Do you come peaceably?" he asked, and I could hear beneath the question the memory of every prophet who had ever arrived in a town bearing bad news. "Peaceably," I said. "I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." I watched the tension in their shoulders ease, watched them exhale as men do when a blade that hovered near their necks is finally sheathed. I sent word for Jesse and his sons to be consecrated as well, and I will confess, my heart was already racing ahead of my feet, already imagining which of these sons the Lord might have chosen. I did not yet understand how deeply I needed to be corrected, The sacrifice itself passed in the ordinary rhythms I had performed 100 times. The heifer led forward, the blood, the fire, the smoke curling upward into a sky gone the color of a ripe apricot as afternoon settled toward evening. But my mind was elsewhere, straining forward toward the moment that mattered most. The sons of Jesse, standing before me one by one. Eliab came first. I remember the exact sensation, my breath catching somewhere behind my ribs, my hand already drifting toward the horn of oil at my side. Eliab was magnificent, tall, broad through the shoulders the way Saul had been, a jaw set firm with the kind of confidence that made men want to follow him into battle without asking why. Every instinct I had accumulated across a lifetime of judging Israel, every assumption about what a king should look like, rose up in me at once and shouted, "This is the one. Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." I have never in my life heard the voice of God correct me so swiftly or so firmly. Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. I stood there with my hand frozen halfway to the oil, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not pain exactly, but a kind of holy humiliation, the particular sting of realizing that even a prophet, even a man who has heard the voice of God since boyhood in the tabernacle, can still default to seeing the way the world sees. I lowered my hand. I said nothing of what I had almost done. I only nodded to Jesse, my throat tight, and said, "This is not the one." Abinadab passed before me next, then Shammah, then 4 more sons whose names I do not even record in my own memory now, only the growing weight of no after no after no, each rejection settling into my stomach like a stone. 7 sons. 7 times the Lord's silence answered my searching gaze. I began to feel something close to panic, not fear of Saul now, but the disorienting fear of a prophet who wonders if he has misunderstood the word of the Lord altogether. Had I come to the wrong house? Had I misheard? I turned to Jesse, and I could feel the exhaustion in my own voice when I asked, "Are all your sons here?" Jesse hesitated. I watched something flicker across his face. Not deception, but the particular blindness of a father who has simply never thought to count his youngest as consequential. "There remains yet the youngest," he said, "and behold, he is keeping the sheep." Keeping the sheep. I felt those words land somewhere deep, because I understood shepherding, not from experience, but from watching what it does to a man's soul. A shepherd learns patience the hard way, out in weather no one else wants to endure, protecting creatures who cannot thank him and would wander toward danger without him. A shepherd learns to fight lions and bears in the dark, alone, with no one to witness his courage but God and the sheep themselves. I had a feeling, sudden and certain, that the Lord had not merely permitted this son to be absent. He had been forming him out there in the fields this entire time, shaping him in obscurity for a purpose his own father hadn't imagined. "Send and bring him," I said. "We will not sit down until he comes." The waiting stretched long enough that I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the eyes of Jesse's other sons on me, confused, perhaps a little wounded that the prophet had passed over each of them for a boy still smelling of the fold. And then he arrived, breathless, likely having run the distance, his tunic dusted with the residue of pasture, a shepherd's staff still gripped in one hand as though he had forgotten to set it down. He was young, ruddy-cheeked from sun and wind, with eyes that held something I had not seen in any of his brothers. Not merely handsomeness, though he was handsome, but a kind of alert, unguarded brightness, as if he had spent so many solitary hours in the presence of God under open skies that he had forgotten how to hide anything. And the Lord said to me, with a certainty that needed no debate, no second glance, no lingering doubt, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." My hands did not shake this time. I want the listener to understand that, after all my fear on the road to Bethlehem, after my failure with Eliab, after 7 rejections that had hollowed out my confidence, in this moment there was no fear left in me at all, only a strange and settled peace. The peace that comes when you finally align yourself with what God has already decided. I took the horn of oil from my side, and I poured it over the head of David, son of Jesse, in the midst of his brothers, in front of his father, in the plain daylight of an ordinary afternoon that was about to become anything but ordinary. I felt the Spirit of the Lord come upon him even as the oil ran down. Not a wind, not a fire, nothing so dramatic as what I had witnessed at other times in Israel's history, but a quiet, unmistakable shift in the air around him, as though heaven itself had leaned down and taken hold of this shepherd boy and would not let him go from that day forward. His brothers stood silent. Jesse stood silent. I imagine David himself did not yet understand what had just been set into motion in his own bones. He was still, in every visible way, simply a boy who kept sheep. I rose, took up my horn, now empty and strangely light in my hand, and made my way back toward Ramah. And as I walked that familiar road home, I turned the day over and over in my mind, turning it the way a man turns a stone to see every face of it in the light. I had come expecting to recognize a king by his height, his shoulders, the commanding line of his jaw, the very things that had once made Saul seem so fit to rule. And I had been wrong, not because those things are worthless, but because they are not what God is measuring. The Lord had not chosen the son who looked like a king. He had chosen the son who had learned, in the loneliness of the pasture, to trust God when no one was watching, to fight when no one would praise him for it, to sing psalms to sheep who could not understand a word of them. God had been preparing David long before I ever rode into Bethlehem with my heifer and my trembling faith. I learned that day, in the marrow of my own bones, that I cannot see as God sees, and neither can any of us. We measure a man by his stature. God measures him by the years he spent faithful in secret. We are drawn to the loud confidence of an Eliab. God is drawn to the quiet obedience of a shepherd boy singing to his flock beneath the stars. I had spent a lifetime as a prophet of the Lord, and still I very nearly anointed the wrong man simply because he looked the part. If you are waiting right now in some field of your own, some place that feels forgotten, unnoticed, too small to matter, take heart from what I learned that day. The Lord is not blind to you. He was never looking at what impressed your brothers. He has always been looking at your heart, and he has never once forgotten where you are. If you have been blessed by this story, subscribe, like, and share it with a friend.